Hey guys, welcome to UFC Betting Edge, and you're watching the main card predictions for Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier, UFC 257. This is a really exciting card. It has two really important lightweight matchups. The first one, of course, McGregor fighting Poirier for the second time. McGregor beat Poirier within 90 seconds or something around that the last time around when they were much younger. Now, Poirier has evolved quite a bit, has achieved a lot of success. So has McGregor, but McGregor has been inactive in a lot of ways. And in his last fight against Donald Cerrone, we saw only 40 seconds of him, and he looked really good. But we don't know if that translates into 25 minutes. So there is a bit of uncertainty. Exciting fight. Then there's Michael Chandler, who's coming from Bellator. He's been a multi-time champion in Bellator. He's coming and facing Dan Hooker, who has looked really good in the last few matches, even in his loss against Dustin Poirier a few months ago. Then there's Otoman Azaitar and Matt Frivola. Hebas is fighting Marina Rodriguez. So yeah, a lot of exciting fights. Even the prelims are awesome. So without further ado, let's dive into the first fight of the main event, which is Amanda Hebas and Marina Rodriguez. So let's talk about Hebas first. Hebas is one of the fighters that I'm really excited who could pose a serious challenge to Weili Zhang if she's able to get there without any losses. Ribas is 4-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes and 2 decisions. Ribas looks very close to being a complete fighter with a good Muay Thai, good ground game. The only missing link could be good wrestling, but she has judo in her back pocket. She has good throws. So, a complete fighter, so to say. She looks much taller than 5'3", but her build height is 5'3". She has a good reach for that height at 66 inches, which will be an inch more than Marina Rodriguez, who stands 3 inches taller than Hebas. Now, Hebas lands about 4.71 strikes a minute with 45% accuracy. Her defense is much stronger with 73% of the shots defended. And I think this is the highest I've seen in a while, if not ever. But the opponents she has faced so far aren't the best strikers. I think the best striker she's faced is Paige Van Zandt, because the others in Randa Marcos, Mackenzie Dern, and I'm forgetting one fighter. They're all grapplers. So Hebas needs to prove that, and she will get a chance to do it against Marina Rodriguez, who's a really good striker. Hebas is a really intelligent fighter, and she plays on her opponent's weaknesses. So she forced Paige Van Zandt to get into a ground battle, and then she forced Mackenzie Dern to be on her feet, and she beat her up there. There were some brief moments where she went to the ground, but she has a clear game plan to exploit her opponent's weaknesses. Now, coming to Marina Rodriguez, she's got a very strange record in the UFC, where she's got 2 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. In her last fight, she was beaten by Carla Esparza in a very close split decision. Even though a lot of media outlets thought that Rodriguez won that fight. So, I've seen all her fights in the UFC 5 in total, and she could very well be 5-0 instead of 2-1-2 if the decisions had gone her way, because all of them were really close. She attacks aggressively in bursts. So she moves forward, throws a bunch of punches, and she has nasty knees and crisp elbows in the clinch. And those are the most dangerous weapons that she has. Hebas needs to avoid the clinch for the most part, and even if she gets there, she needs to take a judo trip right away. She can't stay in the clinch, because if you see Rodriguez fights with Calvillo, you can see she is nasty. Rodriguez likes to put pressure on opponents and lands over 5 strikes a minute with an accuracy of 50%. She absorbs over 3.3 strikes a minute, and her defense is pretty respectable at 61%. But she's one who does not hesitate to take one to give a punch. Now, Rodriguez distributes her attacks to head and to the body really well. Her Muay Thai is at a very high level. Rodriguez's takedown defense, on the other hand, is a little suspect. It's at 61%, and in the fights that she lost, she was taken down repeatedly. Her primary line of defense against those shots or wrestling shots are to grab the opponent by the knee and then just send some knees, which have been fairly effective. However, when she concedes a takedown, she looks really vulnerable on her back. If you see the fight against Calvillo, she was almost finished in the 3rd round. And if you see the fight against Carla Esparza, she was taken down, I think, on 5 occasions out of 9 attempts. So this is something that Amanda Ribas can exploit, but Ribas doesn't have classical wrestling, so she probably has to use judo throws or flips to get there. Now, to summarize, I'm not sure if I mentioned that I don't look at the odds before the fights in order to to stay away from any of the biases. So, and the moment I start analyzing the fight, I know that the fight could be much closer than what the odds suggest. So both fighters have a fairly clear path to victory. So Rodriguez probably has more power and a better technical skills on the feet, and she might steal the fight from Ribas if Ribas cannot get this fight to the ground. However, Rodriguez's takedown defense is not the best, and if Ribas gets the takedown, it could be a short night for Rodriguez, even though Rodriguez has shown the ability to survive on the ground, and she did that against Calvillo, who's a really good grappler. She did it against Randa Marcus, who was pretty good. So I still see this fight going to the distance. Ribas's ground game is top notch, and her jiu-jitsu is really, really effective. If you don't believe me, see the Paige Van Zandt fight, even Randa Marcus fight, Emily Whitmire fight. Her jiu-jitsu is really good, and she can totally submit Ribas. And I think the bookmakers will concentrate on that aspect and not the threat that Rodriguez possesses on the feet. So I think Ribas is going to win by a decision, but the odds that I give her is minus 140, minus 150, and Marina Rodriguez at 120. Now, if you look at the Bet365 odds, they have Amanda Ribas as minus 330. But this is crazy in my eyes, because if the fight stays on the feet, I think Marina Rodriguez wins it. In a pure kickboxing contest, she wins it. So adding the grappling element, I still feel Ribas is favorite, but not that big of a favorite. So if I have to bet on this, I will probably do a live bet rather than a pre-fight bet, because I still feel Amanda is going to win, but the odds are really steep. So I would see how the first round goes and probably go for a live bet. If you're looking for a pre-fight bet, Amanda Ribas by submission could be good value. So the next fight is in the lightweight division, where Othman Azaitar is fighting Matt Frevola. Frevola has had 5 or 6 fights in the UFC where Azaitar is 2-0, but he's looked so explosive. So it's a nice fight between the two. Now, talking about Azaitar, he's 2-0 in the UFC with 2 first-round finishes. I think he won bonuses for both. He has 10 first-round finishes with a 13-0 record. He has a pretty basic arsenal of strikes, but he has dynamite in his hands, and he uses his strikes really well. He throws a good jab and lands an overhand right after. He catches most of the opponents with them, and then he moves forward towards his opponents and lands hooks and short range strikes, which seem to fuck with the balance of the people. So far, no one has been able to utilize or capitalize the forward reckless motion that he has. So we'll see if Frevola can do it. He also has really fast hands, and he throws crazy short range hooks to the head and the body. If you haven't seen that, you got to see the Kamavardi and the Timu Pakalan fight, where he would land with crazy hooks in a very, very short range. He sets super high pace in the first round, and I know Frevola can totally match that. So we'd still have to see that how does Ottoman's gas tanks fares in a grueling 3-round fight if he cannot end the fight in the first round. So that is the biggest question that I have on Ottoman Azaitar. He is also susceptible to takedowns, and Frevola has good takedowns, so we'll see how that goes. Now, talking about Frevola, he's been very exciting in his 5 or 6 fights that he's had in the UFC. He's gotten really quick opportunities with UFC because of his fan-pleasing style. He has power in his hands. He looks to utilize takedowns, and he has cardio to easily go for 15 minutes really hard. So Frevola lands about 3.2 strikes a minute with 39% accuracy, but absorbs around 3.5 strikes with a 60% defense. Frevola has good overhand rights and has a fair bit variety in striking. He utilizes low leg kicks, good body kicks, powerful winging hooks. He has a nice 1-2. He looks to counter leg kicks with right hooks. So he has a pretty varied arsenal as compared to Azaitar. One of the best aspects of Frevola's game is his seamless mixing of takedowns. He has good single leg. He has a good double leg. He takes people down against the cage. And he's developing his submission game. He still has to work on the crowd control aspect, which I think would be really handy in this fight. But something that he will need to do if he wants to progress his career even further. I won't be fair if I don't mention about Frevola's recoverability. He gets smoked in pretty much all the fights, but comes back fighting. He doesn't turtle up. He keeps himself moving, goes for single, goes for a Grammy roll and other stuff. So he can recover from taking shots. Now, to summarize this fight, it's a perfect fight for live betting, and not so much for pre-fight betting for the number of reasons that I mentioned. There are a lot of unknowns in Azaitar's game which we would want to know about. We all know that he can finish it quick, but we don't know how he deals with adversity when he's tired, if the usual 60-second knockout do not come by. He has seen the third round twice, but those fights were at a lower pace than what I anticipate with Frevola. Frevola comes from the Ray Longo camp, where conditioning is extremely important. And we have seen that with Frevola throughout his career. Azaitar has unbelievable power, but and he can totally finish Frevola, but Frevola can take it and bring it in the second and the third round, especially if he decides to utilize the clinch and the takedown game. And that's why, when you look at the odds, Bet365 has Othman favorite as at minus 160, whereas I have him at a slight underdog at 100. The only reason I feel that Bet365 has him there is obviously they see the ability of Ottman, but what I think is Matt Frevola is proven to be, he's not the one to fold easily. And the fact that there are so many unknowns against Zaitar, I feel that Frevola can take it and then come back. There's a fairly high likelihood of that. So if I have to put a bet, I'd probably bet Frevola straight or maybe Frevola by decision. Also, there could be Ottman in round one or Ottman by knockout could be good bets in this fight. For me, it'll probably be live betting. So the next one is in the women's flyweight division where Jessica Eye fights Joanne Calderwood. So talking about Jessica Eye, she's 3-2 in her last 5, coming off of a unanimous decision loss against Cynthia Calvillo, who stepped up from the strawweight division. She was put on the ground several times. The other loss for Jessica Eye came against the champion Shevchenko, where she was head kicked into oblivion. She has also scored some impressive wins against Katlyn Chookagian and Viviane Araujo. So Jessica Eye is she's 5'6" with 66 inches reach and is primarily a boxing heavy fighter. She has decent takedown defense and basic ground game. She likes to keep the fight on the feet and land big punches after her jabs. Jessica lands over 3.6 strikes a minute, but has low accuracy percentage at 36%. She absorbs over 3.5 strikes a minute with a defense of 58%. Her takedown defense is 56%, and she has to be really careful of Calderwood's ever-evolving ground game. Jessica has a nice front leg body and leg kicks, which she has thrown with quite consistency. But she has to be really careful against Jojo, who has a knack of catching those. Now, talking about Jojo Calderwood, she's a busy striker who's coming into this fight having lost through first round armbar against Jennifer Maia. Jojo is also 3-2 in her last 5, and the other loss came in a closely contested fight against Katlyn Chookagian. Jojo lands about 6.2 strikes a minute, so she has a really high strike count with a 48% accuracy, which is great. With the distribution of strikes, unlike the most fighters, she strikes legs and body as well. Like, she's very distributed in her head, body, and leg striking. Jojo has great kicks for orthodox opponents like Jessica. She can use her inside leg kick and outside leg kick like she used against Katlyn Chookagian with a great effect. Jojo has a tendency to catch kicks and sweep their legs under the opponents, and she can totally utilize this in this fight because Jessica Eye has a knack of throwing front leg body kick way too often. So I think Jojo will have the opportunity to do that unless Jessica makes that adjustment. One of the aspects that I'm worried about Jojo is her Muay Thai based attack, in which she doesn't really move her head too much, and she absorbs a lot of strikes to the head. She absorbs over 4.3 strikes a minute, with her defense being around 52%, which is on the lower side. Additionally, a large chunk of Jojo's strike comprises of leg kicks, and a lot of judges tend to overlook those strikes over head strikes that happened with the Katlyn Chookagian fight, where if you see the stats, Jojo is ahead everywhere, but I think the judges did not count leg kicks the same way. There has been occasions where Jojo is sometimes slow to react her armbar defense against Jennifer Maya looked, looked really, really poor in a way that she just did not move fast enough, even when she knew that she was in trouble. So this is something to be wary of. So, as we predicted the last couple of fights, this is also a very tricky fight to predict, and I'm very certain it's going to be a very close fight. I like the volume that Jojo throws, and her Muay Thai based attack is probably going to cause I some problems. But Jojo doesn't really protect her head as much, and I can throw some good strikes. So this is something that goes against Jojo in this fight, I feel. Additionally, Jojo throws a bunch of strikes to the legs, so the head count isn't that high. So that's the judging criteria that I'm more concerned about if I'm betting on Jojo. It happened against Chukagian fight. It happens against Andrea Lee, against Cynthia Calvillo. However, I think that Jojo has been evolving her ground game. Training at Syndicate MMA with Roxanne Modafferi, who's a really good grappler, and she can catch Jessica's kicks and get her to the ground on a regular basis as to steal that win. And I think that the takedowns will be the difference in the fight, and Calderwood can utilize them. So this is a 50-50 matchup for me. Bet365 has it as -110, which is pretty close to what I'm saying. I'm saying Joanne Calderwood is slight favorite because she has a more evolving game. But if it stays on the feet, I say -110 for both of them is good. This fight could be great for live betting, as we see how things are showing up within the first 2 or the first 5 minutes. So I'll keep my eye on this for the live betting, but for pre-fight, I won't be betting on this one. So this fight is a co-main event: Dan Hooker versus Michael Chandler. Exciting fight. Dan Hooker has looked awesome in the last couple of years, and he's welcoming Michael Chandler, who's been at the top of Bellator for the longest time. So talking about Hooker, he can come across as a fighter who is constantly in wars and is, and a brawler. But actually, that is only one side of his game. He can also fight extremely technically with a lot of feints and waiting for your errors to come out. He chooses to make it crazy with some opponents, and the fight with Dustin Poirier, Paul Felder, and Edson Barboza come to mind. He has fought who's who in the lightweight division, and he's beat James Wick, Alaquinta, Gilbert Burns, Jim Miller, Mark DeKisey, and Ross Pearson handily. And he beat everyone except Alaquinta on that list by finishes. So he's a finishing machine. Hooker has really good stabbing front leg kicks, and they can totally thwart Chandler's offense while Chandler is charging towards Hooker. He also has these nasty knees up the middle, and that, I think, is the single biggest weapon, or single most threatening weapon to Chandler, Hooker's knees. Hooker's knees are devastating, and if you need some proof, you need to watch the Jim Miller fight and the Ross Pearson fight. And, that's a living proof of how deadly those knees could be. Chandler's height and his propensity to wrestle, with the build and everything, makes him the perfect target, or he's very susceptible to getting hit by one of those knees if he changes the level down without setting it up. Now, talking about Chandler, his inclusion in the UFC has been pretty good, and he gets to test his skills against the best talent in the world. So he's 5-2 in the last 7 fights, and coming into the Hooker fight, he's got 2 consecutive finishes against Sydney Outlaw and Benson Henderson. His 2 losses came against Patricio Pitbull and Brent Primus. Chandler is 34 years old. He stands 5'8" with a 71-inch reach. He lands about 4.1 strikes a minute with an accuracy of 47% and absorbs about 3.8 strikes with a defense of 52%, which is not very impressive. He's a super athletic dude, and he lunges and lands punches. It's his speed that actually bamboozles his opponents. His punches are telegraphed, but they carry a lot of power. Chandler can totally take Hooker down in a straight wrestling match, but in an MMA setting, with cage being behind the back, it might be a little difficult, especially if we consider the size differential between the two. There is no denying that Chandler has great wrestling. He has good body locks. He throws. He suplexes people. He has double, power leg doubles. So he has a complete arsenal of wrestling attacks, but he needs to set it up against the Hooker. Chandler has shown the tendency to slow down in some of the fights, even though he has five round experience multiple times. I think the pace that Dan Hooker might set for a 3-round fight might be a little too much for Chandler to handle, especially if he eats, those knees or elbows. When Chandler gets hurt, he reverts to double leg takedowns, and that could be a huge detriment in this fight. So he has to be really careful. Now, to sum it up, Chandler is coming to prove to himself that he can hang with the best in the UFC. So he'll be training his ass off. I feel that it is probably not the best matchup for him. This being a 3-round fight actually helps Chandler, so that's good. But Hooker is a tall, rangy guy who throws a lot of straight shots. He throws a lot of stabbing kicks, low leg kicks, and Chandler's explosion is going to cause Hooker some problems early, but takedowns won't be that easy to come for Chandler. If Chandler doesn't set those takedowns, he can totally get guillotined or catch a knee. One of the biggest points that I'm leaning towards Hooker is that he feints, and if Chandler bites on those feints, bites on the feints and just tries to punch and go overboard, Hooker can time him for a knee or an elbow. Ultimately, in my opinion, Hooker has a much diverse striking attack, and Hooker will be able to overcome Chandler's basic striking and the takedowns eventually to manage a KO or a submission. Could be a guillotine or a knee up the middle. But if you look at the odds, my odds and Bet365 odds are pretty close. -150, -138 for Dan Hooker. I do feel that Dan Hooker getting a TKO or a submission is a high likelihood given how their styles react with each other and how explosive Chandler is. There is a total chance that Chandler totally shuts down Hooker's game and then rides him out for three rounds, but that's not how Chandler usually fights. I think he's going to take chances. He's going to make it exciting, and in the process, will get caught. So Hooker by finish. Ooh, now for the main event, and the main event is between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. They've already fought once, with McGregor knocking Poirier out in the first round. It was a shot on the back of the head. Um, Poirier was riled up with all the pre-fight talk. This time it's absent, so the X factors are different this time. Poirier has evolved quite a bit. He's had much more fights than McGregor in the same duration. So let's dive into it. Poirier is coming into this fight after beating some really good strikers. He went to distance in beating Max Holloway, Dan Hooker, and Jim Miller. He also finished Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, and Anthony Pettis. He has been a very active fighter since McGregor's and Poirier's last fight. Poirier has to approach this fight extremely strategically, where the path for success for him comes after the first two rounds. He has to ensure that he doesn't fall into a close range boxing match. So he has to ensure that he stays disciplined, especially in the first few rounds, and set up some leg kicks. Poirier definitely has the cardio advantage. If you look at some of his fights in the last 7 outings, he's landed, over 200 strikes at times as well, and he threw around about 380 strikes with Max Holloway. Now, Conor McGregor's highest in a 5-round fight has been 286. So Poirier can definitely produce a lot of volume that can bother McGregor if the fight goes beyond the third or the fourth round. Poirier has the tendency to walk into punches while he's moving towards his opponents with a flurry of punches. He was doing that in his last fight against Dan Hooker. So even though we've seen a lot of evolution, he does have the tendency to get into a firefight, and that might not be a good idea. It can be totally disastrous because Conor McGregor is master of slipping punches and countering with his deadly left. So he has to be careful there. Poirier's grappling is probably a bit better on paper, but I don't think that he will have a huge advantage over McGregor, especially after Conor's training for Khabib. I think Conor's grappling is underrated, and he could surprise us by dominating Poirier on the ground if at all it gets there. Now, talking about McGregor, he's probably one of the best boxers in the UFC, if not the best. His distance management and his fight IQ are through the roof. He also has a mental edge over almost everyone he fights, except for Khabib or maybe Nate Diaz. He's historically been able to rattle his opponents even before the fight with all the build-up. And you can see their opponents not performing to their ability. Some names such as Dustin Poirier in the first fight, although in their fight, and Eddie Alvarez come into mind, where these great fighters weren't able to perform to their best abilities against him. McGregor is the master of distance control, and the way he fights is best suited for his long body frame. Conor disguises his body frame in such a way to make his opponents feel safe. He shows them that he can't reach them, and then out of nowhere he thrusts his hips forward and can easily touch you and land damaging, knocking out strikes. If you haven't seen the fight with Eddie Alvarez, there are at least 2 or 3 occasions where he just jabs at Eddie Alvarez and he's not able to reach, and that makes Eddie Alvarez feel safe, and then Eddie Alvarez gets cracked at least a couple of times. You got to watch it. If you haven't seen the full reptile breakdown from Dan Hardy for this fight, please go watch it. He details this aspect really well. McGregor built his ground game McGregor built his game around his left hand. Everything else, the jabs, the kicks, the forward pressure, the flashy spinning kicks, are to push the opponent to the cage where he can trap them and land his lethal left hand. McGregor's stance and his style is susceptible to leg kicks, and Poirier would probably need to utilize a few of them, especially early in the fight, in order to be more effective. Now, to summarize this, this is a great fight for MMA lovers, and there are a few variables here that we need to consider. What have been the fighters' evolution path, their activity since their first fight, their chins at lightweight. They both fought at featherweight, so how does their chin hold up now? Conor's lack of competing in the last couple of years. We saw Conor against Cerrone, and he looked damn good, but we don't know what the ceiling is, and how does it translate into a 5-round fight. So there are a few variables here. This fight can end pretty much like the first fight, and Conor McGregor is an extremely fast starter, and he can end the fight at any time. Poirier has a tendency to get rocked early in the fight. If you remember the Michael Johnson fight, he got a little rocked in the first or the second round against Max Holloway, and then the first Conor fight. So he does have the tendency where he could be stiff while coming in, and then can get rocked and probably not be able to find his bearings after. So that is also a possibility. Poirier's chin, however, is much durable at lightweight, and we've seen that quite a lot of times. He's taken punches from a bunch of heavy punches, including Justin Gaethje, and has been able to withstand that. He has been only knocked out once in the last 8 fights against Michael Johnson. So if we look at the odds, my odds are very different as compared to the Bet365 odds, where I have Conor McGregor as the favorite at -165, whereas Bet365 has the favorite close to 3.5 to 1. And I think they are considering the knockout ability and the initial pace and aggression of McGregor too heavily. I think if the fight goes past the 2.5, 3-round mark, Poirier still carries a lot of power. He has the ability to turn it around. So it's definitely going to be interesting. However, if I have to predict one outcome, I think it's a McGregor knockout fairly early. So McGregor in round 1 is a good option, or McGregor by finish is also a good option. If you think that Poirier could beat Conor like I do, I think Poirier by finish is also a good option, because I don't really see this fight going the 5 rounds. So my prediction though is Conor by finish. Thanks so much guys for watching the video. If you liked it, please share, subscribe, and comment. Please let me know what you feel about these fights, if you agree or disagree, and I'll be happy to chat with you. Let's make some money this weekend.